If you care about how real societies survived strain, scarcity and political collapse, this topic matters to you. And if this kind of deep historical survival knowledge is why you're here, make sure you're subscribed to Iron Age Instincts, because this channel exists for people who want substance, not surface-level history. Today, we're looking at how the Romans quietly solved one of the hardest urban problems of all time, feeding dense populations with reliable protein inside cities, using systems that still make sense after modern infrastructure fails. What most people miss about collapse is that it doesn't start in forests or homesteads, it starts in cities. Rome understood this early. Urban survival was not accidental, it was engineered. Fish farming, especially in urban and semi-urban settings, was one of the most underappreciated pillars of Roman resilience, and it offers direct lessons for post-collapse cities today. Why Roman fish farms existed and why they were not luxury hobbies. Modern history books often frame Roman fish ponds as elite indulgences, decorative pools for wealthy villas. That is a half-truth at best. While elite estates did experiment with exotic species, the broader Roman aquaculture system was practical, scalable, and deeply connected to food security. Rome was a city of over 1 million people at its height, and wild fishing alone could never sustain that population consistently. Fish was not just a delicacy, it was a necessity, especially during grain shortages or disrupted trade routes. Urban fish farms existed because they converted water control into protein production. Romans built vivaria, controlled fish ponds inside cities, along riverbanks, near bath complexes, and even integrated into insular infrastructure in port cities. These were not ornamental. They were working systems producing mullet, carp-like species, eel and shellfish that could be harvested predictably. So, how did Roman urban aquaculture actually work in practice? Well, Roman fish farming succeeded because it was honestly simple, robust and, layered. Freshwater systems relied on gravity-fed channels, spring water, or sometimes just diverted river flow. When it came to saltwater systems near ports, the Romans used tidal exchange through stone channels. These allowed fresh seawater to circulate while keeping the fish safely inside. The fascinating bit is the Romans understood things like oxygenation, waste dilution, and stocking density just through observation, not any formal theory. A typical urban setup would involve a stone or brick-lined basin with carefully controlled inflow and outflow. Fish waste would naturally fertilize algae and invertebrates, which in turn created a sort of low-input food chain. Sometimes wastewater from baths and fountains, already warm and nutrient-rich, was redirected into fish ponds, and this actually increased growth rates. It's important to realize this reuse of water wasn't an accident. It was, in fact, an efficiency strategy. For a post-collapse city, this really matters, because it shows aquaculture doesn't require electricity, pumps or chemicals. Gravity, masonry and basic flow control are honestly enough. So, what species did the Romans choose? And, why does that choice still matter? The Romans favoured species that could tolerate crowding, variable water quality, and, human disturbance. Mullets, for example, thrived in brackish water and could survive sudden changes. Eels were highly prized because they fed on scraps and waste, and could survive even in low oxygen conditions. Carp-like freshwater fish were chosen as well, since they grew quickly, and reproduced easily. This is, quite frankly, directly applicable today. In a collapsed urban environment, the species you select will determine your success or failure. Fish that tolerate dirty water, inconsistent feeding, and temperature swings will outperform the delicate, modern aquaculture species. The Romans didn't chase maximum yield, they chased reliability. And that mindset, honestly, is what modern survival planning so often gets wrong. So, fish farms really reinforced urban stability during times of crisis. Fish farms, you see, functioned as protein reserves. During sieges, trade disruptions, or, well, political chaos, fish ponds could be harvested incrementally without collapsing the whole system. Unlike livestock, fish didn't need pasture, grain, or, daily handling. A guarded water source and controlled access were enough. In practical terms, a single well-managed pond could feed dozens of people over months if harvested selectively. The Romans often paired fish ponds with salting and fermentation facilities, producing preserved fish products that extended shelf life dramatically. Garum is famous, but honestly, basic salted fish mattered more. For modern application, this really suggests pairing aquaculture with preservation right from the beginning. Fish farms aren't just about fresh meals, they're about stored calories too. So, how does all this knowledge actually apply to post-collapse urban survival today? Well, a modern city block can, replicate Roman logic using things like abandoned fountains, parking garage basins, drainage reservoirs, or even sealed-off courtyards. If you combine rainwater harvesting with some slow-flow filtration, you can actually maintain a freshwater system. Waste vegetable matter and food scraps, instead of being a nuisance, become valuable feed. With just some simple stone or concrete partitions, you can control the flow and harvesting of water. One practical approach is to convert a shallow concrete basin into a stepped pond. This allows sediment to settle in one chamber while fish occupy another. Water moves slowly between sections, really mimicking those old Roman designs. The trick is to stock hardy species first, keep the density low, and harvest gradually. Remember, the goal here is continuity, not abundance. Security, of course, matters as well. The Romans always placed their fish ponds within controlled compounds, never in exposed public areas. In collapse conditions, access control is just as important as water quality, honestly. Now, why did Roman aquaculture work when so many other systems failed? The real strength of Roman fish farming wasn't technology. It was, in fact, philosophy. It assumed instability. It assumed interruptions. It assumed human error. These systems were designed to fail slowly, not catastrophically. If the inflow stopped, fish could survive for days or even weeks. If feeding stopped, the ecosystems would compensate. That is, quite frankly, exactly what post-collapse infrastructure must do. Too many modern survival plans rely on fragile complexity. Roman aquaculture, on the other hand, relied on physical laws that simply do not change. So, what should historians and survivalists really take away from all of this? Urban survival has always been possible. Rome, after all, proved that dense populations can produce food internally if the systems are designed intelligently. Fish farms weren't just a footnote to Roman life. They were part of the machinery that kept cities functioning far longer than their political institutions probably deserved. If you're serious about historical survival strategies, this is the level of thinking that's worth studying. Not fantasy scenarios or romanticized collapse myths. If this kind of grounded, evidence-based history is valuable to you, do subscribe to Iron Age Instincts. Share this with someone who still thinks cities can't survive collapse. And, well, stay sharp.